Hi, and welcome to today's topic of screening of wheat genotypes for nitrogen deficiency tolerance using stress indices. My name is Leonard, and I'll be running you through. Are you a wheat farmer located in east of Australia that struggles when it comes to the nitrogen or urea application in spring, as there always isn't a rain event that is significant enough to wash it in? Then this is for you. The key messages of this podcast include: there is an overall consensus in the farming community that without nitrogen, the yield and protein quality was severely disadvantaged. The only way to get a good wheat crop is the excessive use of urea or nitrogen-fixing synthetic fertilizers, and that excessive nitrogen beyond the plant's requirements has adversely affected the environment and the economic cost. Every year in Australia, we produce around 25 million tonnes of wheat, which sounds a lot, but the yields of these crops vary from one end of Australia to the other. Environmental events such as rainfall, drought, hail, or other elements can affect these yields. Farmers are always trying to optimise the yield of their crop, therefore the amount of income for their crop. The easiest way to do this is through ensuring that the crop has the right nutrition. Often the limiting factor is nitrogen. Nitrogen application is the most common applied through spreading granular urea that is 46% nitrogen. Micro et al. Has investigated this as something that is not only Australia needs to improve, but the world. So this experiment was conducted to try and work out this. The experimental material included 48 winter wheat varieties that were released from 1936 to 2016, mostly from Croatia, but other plant breeding countries such as Austria, France, Hungary, Italy, Romania, Russia, and Turkey. Over this large period of time, there has been a lot of advances in the breeding technology, so there's big changes. The trial were conducted in a 2-year period to rule out environmental conditions that might have affected the results over time. These locations, there was 2 locations that were sown with 2 different climates. So one was more of a dry and humid, whereas the other was more a Mediterranean climate in red soil. Both of these locations were located in Croatia. The sowing rate was 350 seeds per square metre in all the trials for all the different cultivars. They had a buffer at the beginning and the end just for the plots. Basic and pre-sowing fertilizers were used to achieve the experimental conditions as similar as possible to those conditions that the region used before planting. This was the same when it came to the sprays used. If none were used, other pest diseases may have taken control of the plots, but also that it's unrealistic if wasn't used unless you are organic farming. Chemical is always used. Herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides to control major weeds, insects, and foliar were applied to replicate commercial practices, not only in Croatia but European regions and also the world. All the trials were harvested when it came to harvest maturity, so they weren't left really late or also early, so it was representative of the industry. The nitrogen treatment comprised of two different treatments. So 0 fertilizer of nitrogen, so no urea, and the other was 100 kilograms per hectare. This was applied at tillering, and then there was another hit during stem elongation, as we know it here, which is a growth stage. The results were analysed 5 ways to ensure statistical analysis was completed. This was including ANOVA and grain yield, grain protection context and stress indices, BULP values for grain yield and grain protein content and stress tolerance indices, correlation analysis of grain yield, grain protein content and stress screening indices, identification of nitrogen deficiency tolerant winter wheat cultivars, and principal component analysis for indices, grain yield, and grain protein content. So, what should you decide as a farmer to do, and what varieties should you be using? From the screening of wheat genotypes for nitrogen deficiency tolerance using the screening of indices, out of the 48 genotypes that were trialled, there were only 3 that stood out. So this is from all the technology over the years. It didn't really say where they were from out of the different places. While Australia's genotypes were not included in the trial, a lot of the varieties from around the world would have been used here. However, it's something to consider from the information. The varieties that excelled in this study were Sophia, BC Obsessia, and MV Neoma. These were identified to have the highest grain yield performance under stress and non-stress conditions. While the study also considered protein and harvest as well, this may or may not be something that the farmer is chasing depending on the markets. However, varieties that performed in this area included U1 and OS Olympia, which is interesting as they are not the same genotypes as for the nitrogen deficiency, which would be needed to be considered when deciding on what was best for you. As a farmer, the need to ask themselves, are they chasing yield or are they chasing protein? If they're chasing a milling market that is obviously chasing protein, that might be the way that you need to work out if you need to decide to chase protein. As you provide a premium price to chase one of these markets. To determine the best genotype for you and for the area of Eastern Australia especially, as there are so many variants in this area, it's the best to talk to your local agronomist. They are the ones who will be working in the area in the same environment, therefore will know the genotypes that are successful and the ones that are complete flop. This may be from other farmers that have tried it in the region, but also varieties are being used in trial work to distinguish this. Thank you for listening today. For more information, please contact Leonard at Charles State University to discuss any questions.